Welcome to the Workit Health podcast. My name is Max, and today's episode is a little different, and they are some of my favorite. Instead of sitting down with a guest, we're sharing the story of Randy, a Workit Health member whose path to recovery has been anything but straightforward. Randy talks openly about growing up around addiction, losing his parents, his brothers, going to prison, and eventually finding heroin. He also talks about what happened when he finally found treatment that felt accessible, and just as importantly, a place where he didn't feel judged. And today, Randy's in sober living, he's working, repairing relationships. He's even taking classes to become a certified peer support specialist. His story isn't about everything suddenly becoming perfect. It's about having hope for the future and finding a place where recovery finally feels possible. Here's Randy.
My mom was locked up when I was born, and I lived with my great grandparents coming up. And my village was full of drunks and drug addicts and, just never do well. And I followed suit. I probably started getting high when I was about 15 at the latest. I think it was before that. Started with weed and moved on to, cocaine or pills, because I grew up in a small town. The only thing available was weed, pills, and then finally crack came to town. I never met a chemical that I didn't enjoy. I kept on, me and my brothers get high. And then in 2005, I became a father. But that's the year where I lost my mom and dad. They passed away a week apart. Then about a month and a half after that, my brothers overdosed a day apart. And that's really what just unleashed any semblance of restraint that I had when it came to getting high. And I ended up in prison, got out, ended back up in prison, got out. And then's when I discovered heroin. I'd never experienced heroin till I was probably I was in my 30s and had already been to the joint 4 times, and in Florida it's all pills. That lasted probably about a year, and my rock bottom came whenever I lost our house. Didn't tell baby's mom. Didn't we had a small child, and the landlord showed up one day like, "Why are you still here?" We'd already been evicted, but I hadn't told her. A couple days before that, I found myself in a bank, ready to do this, but the only thing that stopped that, it was one of these banks that's got a branch inside of a grocery, and I go in there at 9 o'clock. I got the gun and the gloves and ready to do it. But this branch didn't open till 10:30, and I'm a heroin addict. I went and sold the gun and got high, and that's the only thing that saved me from there. Because the stress of trying to carry an addiction and knowing that any day now, landlord's going to pop up. Why are you still here? And it was very stressful. And I would like to say that's the last time I used heroin, but I can't. But that's when I got clean from heroin. There's been a couple episodes since then, but it was always just circumstances. I haven't went out looking for it, but it was there. Bad day, blah blah blah, and I ended up using. And it's been about 10 years since I've used heroin. Every day. But then probably about 2 years ago, I I found Workit, and I gave that a shot, and they started me on the Suboxone treatment. And ever since then, there's been no heroin, no opiates at all. I've had a surgery. I've had 2 surgeries since then, but I communicated with my anesthesiologist and my doctor, and I got through that. And I credit a lot of that. I mean, most of that. I did the work, but Workit laid the groundwork and gave me the foundation and the tools and the support, to really just get through that. The worst of it, the worst days, I can log on and there's somebody there. I take a lot of credit, but I share it with them because I don't think I would be where I'm at today without them. Today, I'm in sober living. I've got a job. I've mended a lot of bridges that I burned or I thought I'd burned. I've got a different outlook, and I've just got hope for the future. Nothing's changed. I haven't won the lottery. I'm getting older, but I just, see things different. I don't think I'll ever go back I can't foresee a circumstance where I go back to using heroin or anything else. Even after the heroin went away, I've never been to a party where I didn't enjoy. There was the cocaine, the methamphetamines, and just everything. And with work it like for 2 years now, I've been clean. And whenever I do slip, I take accountability for it. I don't have to hide in the darkness, and that's how I ended up in sober living. And I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, I just had 6 months of consistent cleanness. I'm about to, I've got legal issues, but I'm about to finish those up. I'm taking classes right now from the state to become a certified peer support, and maybe everything I've been through wouldn't be for nothing, on the job training, if you will. Working was my first introduction into recovery. And then I just got out there so far on the meth at one time where I couldn't rein it in on my own. I needed a place to just let it all come together. I needed a safe place, a secure place, somewhere where it was, I had how would you say, the medical people there, and just, not be in the environment where it was accessible. Yeah, no, work it was really my first try. And, like, I've been on probation before, and usually I could clean up in time to go, do what I needed to do for them. But work it really was the starting point, and it's been the guide ever since then. Work it's 100% what got me started on the path to sobriety. Without it, I don't think I would have, because I had to get cleaned up to even realize that I needed to get cleaned up, if that makes any sense. I like the consistency. I don't feel like I'm being judged. There's just it's a welcoming environment. It's not, if like, I'm used to the legal system, not the medical aspect of getting clean. And I don't feel like there's any judgment whatsoever. And I believe they've been there. I believe they honestly care. And it's always just a phone call away when something bad happens. Because, the stigma of being an addict is horrible. And I don't feel that there. Even in my personal pharmacy where I go to get my medication, I feel judged. And, like, whenever I go into my SMA, I don't feel that at all. They make sure that it's a safe place with boundaries, and everybody has to respect that. If there's not another place on earth where I feel that way an hour every time I'm in my session. If I need a one-on-one, it's just a phone call away. They help with the insurance. It's not like, because I was treading into unknown territory. They do this every day. Well, I didn't, and they helped. They coached me along on how to do it, what to expect, what's going to come next, and reassured me all the way. And, it hasn't always been like that. And the telemed it's not just something off the Jetsons. It's amazing, and it's opened the doors for a lot of people to get treatment. Or I can't speak about a lot of people, but I would have never went to a doctor to do it. Never. Not in a million years. And, but just when I can do it with the privacy of my own home, and it just helps. I don't gotta miss work to go make a doctor appointment. And I really don't gotta let anybody know that I choose, unless I choose to, let's share with them what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? And that helps. But just to being able to do it on my time, and, because, I'm an addict. I don't want to completely surrender, but I've completely surrendered. But just knowing that I've got a team behind me, helps to make the solo journey a lot easier. It's like I'm there, but I'm there on my, not being rebellious or belligerent, but I can do it my way where I feel the most comfortable. And yeah, and that keeps the cycle of addiction going, and shame and the guilt that comes with it. If somebody was struggling with addiction and didn't know what to do or where to turn, and they wanted to change things, I would tell them to log on, make the connection. 'Cause you can always go back to the misery whenever you feel like it, but you're going to be pleasantly surprised with, if you go through work it. That you're not going to be disappointed, and it's easier than you think. The new you's just a couple clicks away. Home's a feeling, not a place, and logging into work, it feels like coming home. Thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me share.
And that was Randy's story. One thing he said that really stayed with me was, "Home's a feeling, not a place, and logging into work, it feels like coming home." You can't ask for a better response to a recovery community than that. A huge thank you to Randy for trusting us with your story. I'm Max, and this is the Work It Health podcast. We'll be back with more real stories and conversations about addiction, recovery, and the lives we build along the way. Also, just want to shout out our very own Scott for our opening and closing music. Until next time, however you get there, recovery is worth it.